He never stepped into the ring, but he controlled the fight game like no other. He didn't throw punches, yet he built legends and shattered careers. With his electrified hair, booming voice, and a mind sharper than any jab, Don King rose from the streets to become the most powerful and controversial figure in boxing history. But how did a man with no boxing background seize control of the sport and build an empire? His journey is one of ambition, power, and a ruthless hunger for dominance, marked by controversy, betrayal, and a past stained with crime. Stay tuned as we expose the unbelievable rise and the dark side of Don King. And if you love deep dives into stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more. Donald King was born on August 20th, 1931, in Cleveland, Ohio, the fifth of 6 children to Clarence and Hattie King. His father worked at the Otis Steel Plant, where tragedy struck on December 7, 1941. Clarence was killed in a horrific accident when a ladle exploded, engulfing him in molten steel. Left to raise the family alone, Hattie received $10,000 in compensation and moved them to the middle-class Mount Pleasant neighborhood. She made a living selling peanuts and homemade pies, with young Don and his siblings helping out. Their main customers were gamblers frequenting a local policy house, a front for an illegal numbers game. It was there that Don King was first introduced to the world of underground betting, a world that would shape his future. King and his older brothers eventually got involved in the gambling racket, embracing the hustle with street-smart ambition. As King would later say, it was statutorily illegal. But who knew about the statutes? After graduating from John Adams High School in 1951, he briefly attended Kent State University before dropping out, drawn more to the fast money of the numbers game than the slow grind of academia. His rise in the gambling world took a dark turn in 1954 when he shot a man in the back after catching him attempting to rob one of his betting houses. The killing was ruled justifiable homicide, but it wouldn't be the last time King took a life. In 1967, he brutally stomped an employee to death over a $600 debt. Convicted of voluntary manslaughter, he served nearly 4 years in prison before being released, later receiving a pardon from the Ohio governor. Emerging from prison with an unstoppable drive, he set his sights on boxing promotion, a world as ruthless as the one he had left behind. His break came in 1972 when he convinced Muhammad Ali to participate in a charity exhibition, setting the stage for his meteoric rise in the sport. King soon orchestrated some of boxing's most iconic bouts, including the legendary Rumble in the Jungle and Thrilla in Manila. Over the decades, he worked with the biggest names in the sport: Ali, Joe Frazier, George Foreman, Larry Holmes, Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, and many more. But success came at a price. King's business dealings were as controversial as they were lucrative. Many of the fighters he promoted accused him of exploitation and fraud. Mike Tyson, once his most high-profile client, later said he did more bad to black fighters than any white promoter ever in the history of boxing. Lawsuits piled up, with several fighters, including Tyson, suing him for tens of millions of dollars. Yet he remained defiant, embodying both the charm of a showman and the cunning of a hustler. His life reads like a crime novel, a tale of power, corruption, and ruthless ambition. Before he became boxing's most notorious promoter, he was a numbers kingpin in Cleveland, running an illegal bookmaking operation from the basement of a record store. It was in this underworld that he earned the nicknames The Kid, Kingpin, and the Numbers Czar. But numbers weren't the only thing he controlled with an iron fist. Violence, too, became a defining part of his empire. In 1954, King gunned down a man attempting to rob one of his gambling operations, a killing deemed justifiable. But violence followed him. Over a decade later, in 1966, a dispute over a $600 debt turned fatal when he brutally stomped an employee, Sam Garrett, to death. The attack, carried out in broad daylight in front of witnesses, was as brutal as it was senseless. King kicked, stomped, and pistol-whipped Garrett until he lost consciousness. 4 days later, Garrett succumbed to severe head trauma. His final words, according to witnesses, were a desperate plea. "Don, I'll pay you the money." King claimed self-defense, but the jury saw it differently. He was convicted of second-degree murder, later reduced to manslaughter. and served nearly 4 years in prison. In prison, he claimed to have transformed himself, devouring books from the prison library and embracing the philosophy, "Don't get mad, get smart." But once released, he found new ways to manipulate the world around him. Armed with his signature bravado and unchecked ambition, he carved his way into boxing, using his criminal past not as a deterrent, but as a tool for dominance. He became a master at striking deals that left fighters shortchanged and himself vastly enriched. He showered them with promises, wielded contracts like weapons, and ensured that those who stood against him were buried in legal battles. Boxing's biggest names, Muhammad Ali, Larry Holmes, Mike Tyson, would all later accuse King of fraud and exploitation. Ali, once the sport's most powerful figure, was duped into signing away millions. A confidant of King handed the ailing champion a suitcase with $50,000 in cash and a document that effectively ended Ali's lawsuit against King for underpayment. Ali, mumbling and frail, signed it. Holmes, too, found himself shorted, alleging that King siphoned off $10 million from his career earnings through hidden fees and deceptive contracts. Tyson, arguably King's most famous client, called him ruthless and deplorable, suing him for $100 million. The case was eventually settled for $14 million, pocket change compared to what King had already taken from him. Beyond boxing, his name was entangled with organized crime, tax evasion, and political manipulation. His house was bombed in 1957, and later that year, he was shot in the head and neck for refusing to pay protection money to crime boss Shonda Burns. When questioned about his ties to mobster Gennady during a 1992 Senate investigation, King invoked the Fifth Amendment. He dodged racketeering charges in the 1999 IBF corruption case, even as prosecutors labeled him an unindicted co-conspirator. He used his power to buy favor, making friends in high places from politicians to celebrities. He even secured a pardon from Ohio Governor Jim Rhodes in 1983, backed by letters of support from Jesse Jackson, Coretta Scott King, and others who either ignored or underestimated the depths of his corruption. For decades, King manipulated fighters, contracts, and entire governing bodies of boxing. Tim Witherspoon was forced to sign multiple contracts, some blank, while King's son Carl illegally took 50% of his earnings. Witherspoon, like many others, found himself not just fighting opponents in the ring, but battling King's relentless greed outside of it. The HBO broadcast rights for his bout against Frank Bruno brought in $1.7 million. Witherspoon saw only $90,000 of it. Even legends like Lennox Lewis found themselves at odds with King, suing him for $385 million over fight contract manipulations. Terry Norris took King to court, alleging theft and collusion with his own manager. King, true to form, settled out of court for $7.5 million, but only after dragging the case out for years. In 2005, King even attempted to sue ESPN for $2.5 billion in a desperate bid to silence a damning documentary that exposed his crimes and deceit. The case was dismissed, but the ruling itself was telling. While the court acknowledged that some claims against King might not be fully substantiated, his reputation was already so deeply tarnished that defamation was virtually impossible. Despite his sins, King has always found a way to reinvent himself. He ingratiated himself with politicians, aligning with both George W. Bush and Barack Obama when it suited him. He became a Prince Hall Freemason and received an honorary doctorate, all while continuing to enrich himself off the sport he had corrupted. For years, he conducted an annual turkey giveaway in Florida, a publicity stunt meant to mask the lives he had ruined. Now, at nearly 100 years old, King's legacy remains as controversial as ever. In September 2024, he was hospitalized for an undisclosed illness that required a blood transfusion, sparking widespread speculation about his health. Mike Tyson, in an interview, said bluntly, "Don is not doing well right now. He's probably close to 100 years old. He's not doing well." Perhaps King's greatest trick was convincing the world that he was just a flamboyant promoter rather than a predator in a suit. His story is not one of redemption, but of a man who mastered the art of deception, built an empire on corruption, and walked away with millions while those who trusted him were left broken, battered, or dead. Don King, a man whose name became synonymous with boxing and controversy, found his most enduring partnership outside the ring with his wife, Henrietta. They married in 1959, long before King's rise to fame, and she remained by his side for over 5 decades until her passing in 2010 at the age of 87. Through the highs and lows of his tumultuous career, Henrietta provided stability, a quiet presence in the shadows of a man whose life was anything but quiet. Together, they raised 3 children, Debbie, Eric, and Carl, and later welcomed grandchildren and great-grandchildren into their family. Despite his ruthless reputation in the boxing world, King made efforts to give back to the community, crafting an image of generosity. His most notable philanthropic effort came in the form of his annual turkey giveaways, where he handed out thousands of Thanksgiving turkeys to underprivileged families. Whether this was genuine goodwill or a calculated attempt to soften his public image, the act became a yearly tradition, cementing his presence beyond just the world of sports. Through the years, his personal life stood in stark contrast to his public persona. To his family, he was the patriarch, the provider. To the outside world, he was a shrewd, often ruthless businessman whose dealings left many boxers feeling exploited. Even in his later years, as he stepped away from the limelight, King remained an enigmatic figure, celebrated, despised, and undeniably one of the most fascinating characters in sports history. He has always lived as boldly as he promoted fights, embracing a lifestyle as extravagant as his personality. His success in the boxing world allowed him to indulge in the finer things, none more evident than his sprawling estate in Windsor, Ohio. Enclosed by a pristine white fence, this massive property stretches across thousands of acres and even features its own boxing training camp, a fitting tribute to the sport that made him a fortune. Beyond his grand estate, King's taste for luxury extends to his cars. He has a particular flair for vehicles that make a statement, with one of his prized possessions being a 2009 Jeep Grand Cherokee, a powerhouse of an SUV with a V8 engine, perfectly suited to his larger-than-life persona. But even that is overshadowed by his Rolls-Royce, a classic symbol of wealth and prestige, reflecting the heights he reached in his career. Every inch of King's lifestyle mirrors the success he built, the fortune he amassed, and the relentless ambition that defined him. From his opulent home to his high-end car collection, Don King remains a living testament to the power, controversy, and spectacle that shaped his legendary career. Before you go, don't miss out on exclusive perks. Click the link in the description to become a channel member and enjoy awesome benefits, like suggesting future video topics, getting early access to new content 48 hours before anyone else, and much more. Your support means the world and helps us keep bringing you the stories you love. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe for more amazing content. And while you're here, why not check out our deep dive into Kendrick Lamar's journey? Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.